Hi, welcome to the Israel First television program with myself, Martin Blackham, and with my wife, Natalie Blackham. Thanks for joining us today. This is the program that looks at Israel. We look at the news, we have interviews, and we have features from Israel. And we also have teaching from a Hebraic perspective. And in the news today, just as we've come in the studio, remember all the news is as we're in the studio. This is the Haaretz newspaper from Israel, and it's got defense differs with politicians on Hamas deal. Defense differs with politicians on Hamas deal. And the Israeli Security Cabinet was scheduled to meet today as we've come into the studio to discuss a possible 5-year truce with Hamas. However, in the last 24 hours, over 150 rockets or even more were launched by Gaza terrorists Israel. 19 Israelis were injured, one critically. Thousands of families slept in bomb shelters in the south of Israel and protected spaces. People were treated for panic attacks, including 2 pregnant women who went into labor. Very often it's because there's
really?
Okay. Right, yes.
I knew that it was pregnant ladies, but I didn't know that they went into labor.
They went into labor.
You see, people don't understand when they see title on the news when they see it, because you were telling me that the BBC was saying even terrible things. They were speaking more about Hamas, who lost some people, than like Israel, who is having a lot of trouble, and is the summer, the children are at home.
Right. Well, they didn't explain. The thing is, and this is very important for you to know, is that when you see the world media, and this was a story in the BBC, it said that there was 2 or 3 Palestinians were killed due to Israeli air attacks. What it didn't explain is that Israel was responding to this 150 rockets being fired and the 19 people being injured, including one critically. It did not, or you had to really look into the story to see that. So the story is misworded. It should have been, yes, there was an attack against Gaza, but it was due to their provocation by firing 150 rockets at Israel.
And again, when we think about that, it's like if you have the country who is next to you firing to you, you have to protect your civilians, you have to protect your own country. And no country in the world is restraining themselves so much than Israel, because they don't want to have war. They are really trying to restrain themselves, but Hamas is still carry on.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the philosophy behind all of this in a minute, because it's very important, because sometimes we don't understand why the story, we have the stories themselves, but there is a story behind the news, and I'm going to explain a little bit for you at home how all this works. Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman were holding today a security assessment with senior military and defense officials at the IDF headquarters in Kiryat in Tel Aviv. And according to Haaretz, the IDF, the Israeli military, were deploying additional Iron Dome anti-missile batteries. Those are the missiles that shoot down missiles in the region in Israel in preparation for Hamas, possibly increasing the range of its targets. During past wars, rockets have reached as far as Tel Aviv, Jerusalem and Beersheba, and indeed where we have the studio today. We know that there have been rockets that have landed in the area, really. So it's very important that...
But even when you speak about that, again, looking at the reality here, is like we forget that how the Iron Dome is really protecting the civilians. And we're looking, do you remember you've done a great program with Avi Jorish, and he's speaking about the Iron Dome. We need to know that Israel is doing everything, not just to restrain themselves, but also to protect their people and create and invent new things, really not to have war more and more, but like to restrain the things, but at the same time keep the civilians protected. So it's amazing.
An amazing invention, because it's there to protect people rather than an aggressive weapon. It's there as a protective weapon, like the Patriot missile. It's similar. You're probably maybe familiar with the Patriot missile, which was used I think during the Iraq War and in Kuwait and different countries and even in Israel, which is a missile that shoots down other missiles. So it's really a protective thing for civilians to protect us from these missiles that are being fired. Because if there wasn't this system, these missiles would hit targets in Israel. And, from the last war when we were here, during Operation Protective Edge, we saw the missiles coming, and there was a lot of missiles coming.
And you need to know, one missile who is going to protect us is $30,000. So
Gosh.
it's very expensive even to protect their own, you know, for Israel, the war is very, very expensive.
That's right, and there's a huge cost that Israel's, one of its biggest costs is defense because of these kind of things. There's a huge amount of money which has to be put aside, the budget for defense. Now, I want to explain a little bit about what's all of the things that are happening and to help you understand some of the philosophy, because I talked about from Haaretz newspaper, and I mentioned about the possible Hamas deal, the peace treaty with Hamas. But we have to understand that Hamas is an Islamic terrorist organization. They are based on Islam. And when they talk about a peace treaty, they are really, the Arabic word is hudna, which is a very different concept than in the West. In the West, when we talk about a peace treaty, we mean that people will live basically forever. Usually there'll be a long-term peace. They don't mean that. Hudna is an Arabic word, as I say, for a peace agreement, and it's a ceasefire when the Muslim side is weaker. In other words, they're not as strong as those they're attacking, the usually unbelievers. In Islam, a hudna is really an illusion to deceive and destroy Western democracy. In Islam, hudnas with a non-Muslim enemy should be limited to 10 years because Muhammad the Prophet, his battle with one city was 10 years. He had the hudna, and then he attacked them again and caught them off guard. A genuine peace treaty, as far as Westerners are concerned, those of us who live in the West, cannot be possible from an Islamic point of view. And this is how Hamas sees the situation with Israel. A peace treaty is temporary while they gain strength to attack again.
That's it.
Very sadly.
Yeah, they take the time. They want to have time
rearm,
to stop. Exactly.
And when they fire the missiles, what's very interesting, because today, as I say, as we've come in the studio, we've had 150 rockets in the last 24 hours. What's very interesting is that when they fire them, although they fire them willy-nilly, they don't know exactly where they're going to go. They do monitor the media. They do monitor what's going on to see. They know which rockets are being fired from where, from which group of terrorists are firing the rockets, and they do monitor the media and websites and the internet to see where these rockets have landed. So it's not as...
And you hear, again, when you say all this thing, we hear about the rockets, we hear, maybe people hear it more maybe in the news, but again you have the fires, who hasn't stopped at all since end of March.
From incendiary kites?
Yes, sorry, is that they are sending kites and balloons, and some are going even further. They are using also animals, I think we spoke already about that. But now when you count at the end of the, I mean, like kind of after a few months, you can see how it's been really damaging the environment and the people. You know, there is consequences of all these things, and it's on all Israel. And it's even on Gaza, because Israel is also importing fruits and importing vegetables in Gaza. And so, you know, it's a terrible thing right now.
And I think some of the stress that's being felt isn't reported, that the children who are in the schools, or not in the schools, maybe they're in, as we're filming today, maybe they're in the underground shelters and having to stay there. When it's a particularly dangerous time, they don't allow them out. So can you imagine that you've been all night in a bomb shelter and then you can't even go to school, you have to go, or you go to school and then you have to go into other bomb shelters. So this has a traumatic effect on the children. And,
in the area, as you say, but like yesterday, I could hear some ladies who lives here, and the little boy was going, neon, neon, and the mom said, don't do that, I don't like to hear this noise. So it's affecting the whole country,
really, yeah.
not just in the area, because if you have compassion and empathy, you can feel what the people feel, so you feel also the tension and all this kind of thing.
And one of the problems, not necessarily the most central problem in Gaza, is the Iranian problem, and again another Muslim country. So again, on this basis of jihad and domination and hudna, the temporary so-called peace treaty. Iran has been in the news, and I've just got the Jerusalem Post. We like to do the news review, see what the newspapers are covering in Israel. And it says, US reimposes Iran sanctions. And there's a picture of Donald Trump signing the declaration to reimpose sanctions on Iran. And Donald Trump has said individuals or entities that fail to wind down activities with Tehran risk severe consequences. The Trump administration has reimposed sanctions on Iran. The United States President Donald Trump put back in place restrictions on financial institutions that deal in Iran's currency, which has spiraled to its lowest value in history. The harshest sanctions will return in November of this year, when Washington will target Iran's oil exports. The sanctions were welcomed in Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised US President Donald Trump for reimposing the sanctions, saying it's an important moment for the world. Why? Why is there sanctions? Well, primarily because of the nuclear issue, that they've said that unless they're clear about their developments with nuclear weapons, that they've been building all the components to do a nuclear bomb, unless they stop their developments with nuclear weapons, then the sanctions will remain until they allow the weapons inspectors to go in and to completely show that that's gone. I know in Korea that it's still at the moment not clear, but in Iran they won't even allow any inspections or anything like that.
And I saw that Netanyahu say well done to Trump and say, okay, now Europe has to make also some step for sanctions for Iran. And I just read in the newspaper today that Europe didn't want to do anything, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's a very serious issue because
Netanyahu has been speaking about that for years and years and years. He spoke about it. I'm sure you remember there was a UN at the UN. He had a very special speech, and this was a few years ago. So this is not just new, and he's fighting it. But he's fighting it also very interesting. You know, Mart, he's fighting it also like he's doing some special YouTube. So he's really using the media also to speak about Iran and how the people in Iran, how life is terrible for them because a lot of the money is used to export terror.
This is a tough story, but you need to hear it. Imagine a 15-year-old Iranian girl named Fatemeh. She's smart, and she dreams of starting her own business. Fatemeh wakes up for a run before school. She tries to fill up her water bottle, but this is the water that comes out. Fatemeh starts her run, and she wants to feel the wind in her hair. But when she removes her head covering, religious police threaten to beat her. Fatemeh gets ready for school. But the headmaster of the Hadaf girls' school where she goes tells her that her school is closed. You see, there's too much air pollution. Thousands have died from smog in Tehran. Fatemeh walks to Harandi Park to clear her head. But the park is filled with drug dealers. She stops at her favorite bakery in Aladdin Mall to eat cake yazdi. But there's a nationwide strike. Fatemeh walks past the Parmis high-rise building, and she sees the 20th floor engulfed in flames. Firefighters haven't been able to extinguish the flames for days because they lack the money for proper equipment. Fatemeh is completely exasperated. Why is everything in my country falling apart, she asks. She wants to voice her concerns on social media, but the regime bans Facebook and Twitter. They're terrified that Fatemeh might get access to information that they don't control. Fatemeh needs to relax, so she turns on the TV. The electricity collapses. What are our leaders doing with all our money, Fatemeh asks in despair. She opens the Vataneh Imrouz newspaper, and she finds out. Billions wasted moving Iran's army to Syria. Billions wasted trying to get nuclear weapons. Billions wasted on war in Yemen. Fatemeh may be an imaginary name, but her story is the real story of millions of Iranians. If you want peace, help Fatemeh. Help the people of Iran to raise their voice against a regime that oppresses them and denies them a life of dignity, prosperity, and respect.
And so the own people in Iran lives is very difficult. Right now, this week, there was again some ladies who went outside and were saying, we don't want these things, let us leave and let us have some money for us to be able to live. So it's important like you have to do the political work, and you have also to do a work in the people. So these two things can try to bring more peace.
And if you want to catch up with the latest news from Israel, don't forget you can go to our Facebook page. We do as much as we can, we do a weekly, a daily news story, which you can subscribe to and receive that on your Facebook feed. Well, the Jerusalem Post, and it's a newspaper that we look at very regularly, has a story. It says, meeting between the Prime Minister and Druze leaders, those are the people who live in the majority of them live in the north of Israel, in the Druze communities, ends in acrimony. And it says underneath in the Jerusalem Post, nation-state sponsor dictator attacked in Carmel, called a Nazi. So, what is all this fuss about this Jewish nation-state law? Natalie is going to tell us all about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing new, interesting enough. You know, the Justice Minister, Shaked, was speaking, saying there is nothing revolutionary at all. Israel do not have a constitution, so they have basic laws that they need to have to help the justice in the land to be able to be done. So there is some basic laws who are very important, and they never done one saying Israel is the Jewish state. And so they declare it in 1948, but there was no law, basic law done for that. So Netanyahu said, for the next generation, this is very important, and we need to have that. So there is nothing really changed, but there is some minority who feel, like you say, like the Jews, saying, hey, we feel that we are put as a second-class citizen. But what I want to say about this law is exactly the values that they gave when they were declaring the Jewish state, okay? But they are speaking about the value of settlement, so this is very important. For the people who really want to see the settlements growing, the Jewish communities. And there is also about immigration and the national identity. Now, you know, like the anthem, the Atikva, very famous.
The national anthem.
The national anthem, it wasn't a law that it was theirs. And I remember seeing people saying, oh, is it really ours? Some Muslims are saying, I don't want to sing it because it's really Jewish. And so they say, okay, now this is our anthem, national anthem. So when you are living in Israel and you are a citizen, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Jews, and there is a few others, is like you are still part of the Jewish state. And so they have their anthem and the national anthem, and that's it, you know. And the Hebrew is also their language. Now, before it was Arabic and Hebrew, and now is Hebrew, because it's the Jewish state. And it's like, you know, they've been waiting for 2,000 years to have that, and they are having that. And the other languages obviously are important, but they are not like the legal language. So like, for example, in the Knesset, they will speak Hebrew, the law will be written in Hebrew, and all the paper, you know, administrative things are written in Hebrew, which in a way make it more easier for them because it's their language, and it's like they want to show this is our identity, not just now for now, but for the next generations coming. So it's very important. They are speaking about the Jewish holidays, they are speaking about Shabbat, which is part of the Jewish holidays. They are speaking about the Hebrew calendar, which is very interesting because for us, being like from Europe or from the Western world, is like we are used to the Gregorian calendar. But now the Hebrew calendar is put again, like officially in Israel. Now, they are still using the Gregorian calendar because they are like very international, but the Hebrew calendar will be written when you receive a letter. You will have also the Hebrew calendar, which is important. And that is the national home for the Jewish people. They didn't have that for 2,000 years. They declare it in 1948, and now they say we need to have a basic law in our country because we don't have a constitution, and this is very important.
And so it's basically just putting into law all things which were happening anyway.
Yes.
But they've just legislated them.
That's it.
So small communities who are not Jewish obviously may feel...
That's it, because minorities can feel... But we know how the Jewish people are. They have been on the other side, been persecuted for so long, and they don't want to persecute the people, but they say, this is our place, and we want to declare
I can
it.
understand that they'd want to put into...
Yeah,
because it's
very important.
And, you know, I'm not sure about what even the Constitution, if they've got a Constitution or how that works.
They don't have a Constitution.
So they need to have something
So
written
they need
down.
to have basic laws, yeah.
Now, you brought into the studio, Natalie, some books.
Yes, because again, when we speak about the Hebrew, this is like happening in Israel. But we were speaking last week, and I'm sure that you enjoyed this program about redemption with Rivka Lambert-Adler, and we're speaking about the Hebrew language also. No, funny enough, we didn't speak about it, but this is part.
Not so much.
We didn't. No, not really. But this is part of redemption. That the Hebrew is been revived for the Jewish people, but now is also revived for us to understand more the Torah. And this is the book. So I've done it in English already a few years ago, but now we have the French one. And so if you want it, you go on our website, you can find it. And it's really, you know, when you start to read slowly your Bible in Hebrew, it's like you receive more the mind of God. And I love what Tuli Weiss was saying. It's like, you know, God speaks to us in Hebrew, and we speak to Him in our own language. And it's really more and more, and I know it's like it's a big shift, but we want to see the next generation, and it's growing because it's really something like in the world a lot of people want to learn. And by the way, the Hebrew language, there is more and more schools and things on the internet because people want to learn Hebrew.
When they get the book, Natalie, what exactly are they going to find in? How have you written it?
Very simple. It's like, you know what, I was discovering it and I thought, I'm sure that there is a lot of people also who wants to discover it. So it's just the introduction of the letters and really to understand the mind of God again behind the Hebrew language. That is an amazing language, is a creative language.
So you go through the letters.
I go through the letters. And not only that, is like to show you there is principle of life that God is giving with the letters. And you can see slowly the building with these 22 letters, and this is just amazing. So you can really enjoy it. But it's really like a basic book for you to start. And sometimes you can learn Hebrew and not really understand the mind of God behind. And it's really what I was trying to do, like introduction and showing, look, this is a creative language that God has given us, because He really wants to communicate with us. He has been communicating with the Jewish people. They kept the Torah, and now He's part of the nations who wants to hear about the Torah. And the best way is to know a bit of Hebrew, and slowly, it's like you learn more and more.
And it's not a scholarly book. It's not a difficult book to read. It's simply
and you
written.
can just read one chapter and show it and go back, you know, to the other letter, and you can go back and show it. I write it very concise, so people and I have friends who say, you know, I read it, but it's like my mind was going somewhere. I could see even more, and I'm like, good. This is the point of writing the book concise, but you can really see that there is more thoughts who can be touched through the book.
So what's the best way for the people to get the book?
On the website. And what you can do also, if you want to use it for studying, and like for example, like a group study, you can buy a few books. You can send me your email, and we do always some special price if you buy more than 10.
And if you would like to get involved with supporting the work of Israel First television program, all the information is on the website. There's a donate button. We've made it more user-friendly. And by the way, there's a lot of information on the website. There's also there's a blog there which tells you a bit about the recent Christian leaders at the Knesset meeting. There's also news there. You can subscribe. If you'd like to stay in touch with what we're doing, there's a subscribe button there. You can also watch all the programs on YouTube there's either on the website or on our YouTube channel, and keep up to date with all the things that we're doing. So thank you so much for joining us today on the Israel First television program. Myself, Martin Blackham, with my wife, Natalie Blackham, and we'll be right back after this.
Shalom, dear friends. We carry on the 10 Commandments, which is the Decalogue, and in Hebrew is Aseret Advarim. Do you remember? We're looking at the number 8 today, and is do not steal. And in Hebrew is lo tignov. Now, obviously, we don't steal, is what we say. But it's not just stealing things, it's also stealing people. So the Jewish way is also very important, that do not kidnap people, because you are taking the life of somebody and you are taking his will, and you don't also enslave people, because again, we are made in the image of God. It's always what we have to think behind. Everybody is precious. And there is this side, and we have also to look on the other side, is like do not steal like an idea of somebody, or do not steal like a creation of somebody. Like somebody is inventing something, you heard about it, and you are making the same thing. This is not fair, because again, it's part of stealing the creation that somebody is doing. And we have to look also on the other side. The positive side is like you think God is generous. So when we say do not steal, it's like also we can be generous. Like if your brother is in need, it's important to help him. And a nation will be also elevated if she does charity, if she is generous. And like we are also elevated when we do charity, when we are helping, we're not just thinking about ourselves, but we can see the world around us. And as our Father is generous, we can learn also to be generous. So we look at this 8th commandment, which is do not steal. In Ivrit is lo tignov, and we are learning to be like our Father. Let us be generous with each other.
Great to be with you today. Hope you enjoyed that Hebrew segment. We love to hear from you. You can email us at info@israelfirst.org. Visit the website www.israelfirst.org. And remember, we're the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.